basic fight, flight, survival, fawn, freeze, whatever you want to call it, just instinct, when all reason is devoid. Nuclear warfare, that you're saying that that won't happen at all?
Well, I'm not, I mean, it probably will happen at some point, or it may happen at some point, but what makes you think that it's going to happen within our lifetime?
People are going to ignore the politicians and the economists are saying, oh, well, this the data says what? And they say, the people are going to say, well, I don't care about the data. I just want to live and survive.
Why does this prolonged lapse in growth, I should say, or decline in growth, regression? Why is it tantamount to the end of civilization? Okay.
I'm afraid we've reached the peak of civilization.
Hello, everyone, to the Future President podcast. Today is Sunday, and what that means is that it's going to be Sit Down Sunday, and we have a special guest named Carter with us today. So, me and Carter, we talked about AI, we talked about sociology, psychology, the sort of cycles of modern technology and history and human crises, and it's overall really interesting, so I hope you guys give it a listen and enjoy. And just before we begin, I want to shout out my website, paxamericana.my.canva.site. I mentioned it the previous episode, but just in case you haven't seen it, I have an article on there already. And also, just of an important note, we're going to be moving episodes to every Saturday instead of every Tuesday and Thursday, just to make the episodes more high quality and longer, to adhere to some of y'all's feedback. Also, for technical reasons, the podcast is officially being moved to Spotify and YouTube, and it will for the foreseeable future. So be sure to check it out there. And without further ado, let's begin. Welcome, Carter, to the Future President podcast. It's nice having you.
Nice having you as well.
So, there's been a lot going on in the world right now. I just want to hear your general thoughts.
Well, I think from a cyclical perspective, as much as society may seem like it's collapsing, we're just going back into another cycle. And what I mean by that is from about 2000 and I'd say 13, 12 to 2019, we were in arguably the longest period of global peace that humanity has ever experienced. And coming out of that with COVID, I think that has just snowballed into just this chaos, and we haven't really expected it. And now it seems as though people are becoming more primitive and they're falling back into their ways of just staying safe and staying home and the high sensitivity. Just it just seems like everything is very sensitive and personal with politics and just the emotional spectrum of how people are reacting to information and the use of it. It seems like we aren't exactly going in any direction, or at least not in a desirable direction. But naturally, as time progresses, we will face a climax. It just seems like we're going up and up and up and up, and that at some point that that glass is about to overflow. And when it does, it'll be chaos, but then we'll go back into equilibrium again, just as the economy does. But those are just my thoughts.
So what do you mean, like, more specifically? You mean like social change, technological change is going too far up that it's gonna overflow the glass, as you say?
Yes. So think, for example, with the AI boom recently. I watched a few videos yesterday about just the bus process, and a lot of people are saying that similar to the dot-com crash, we're going to reach a period where this rapid just change in technology will reach a climax and it will crash again. And just the same with the economy. Inflation is rising and it will eventually crash. And it's cyclical. It's a cycle in every aspect. And when we're in this stage, people do become more sensitive. Uprisings tend to happen. People argue for wages, civil issues, and a lot of the times they are good, such as like the women's rights movement, for example. or the civil rights movement in general, all of which happened in like the 1960s, 1950s, around that point. But at some point, it has to peak. At some point, it'll crash down. And when it does crash, you'll face recessions, homelessness, and people will kind of be a little bit, I would say, silenced. For example, you can't really argue, oh, I hate the economy when the only thing you're focusing on is trying to get food for your family. But we're in this odd position where we feel like we're threatened, and we certainly are, but we're still in so much safety in such of a technological just bubble that the same people who are arguing that prices are too high are still able to live comfortably, relatively comfortably, without having that direct fear of life or death. But that'll change in a few years when the bubble pops.
How do you think the bubble's gonna pop?
Well, the first step of the bubble popping is there will be mass layoffs. I mean, this is just the process of a recession, I would say. Mass layoffs will occur. People will quit their jobs. There may be some fights within workplaces, like the workers will demand higher wages, which means that it's actually a funny joke we learned in economics where it's the same thing. The workers demand higher wages, which means prices go up, which means workers demand higher wages, which means prices go up for consumers, which means workers demand, and so on and so forth. And that's just constantly happening. I mean, in California, I think minimum wage is what, $22 an hour? Well, gas is also $7 a gallon. And when the bubble keeps getting bigger and bigger, and just like with gum, the bubble has to pop. And so when the bubble pops, the prices the prices will stay up, but people will eventually quit because they simply can't find work that offers. See, the problem with inflation is that the job market becomes very tightened and constricted. The only jobs that offer 12, 16, 18, $24 an hour are the minimum wage jobs. But the problem is they require skills that are equivalent to that of what a relatively experienced 35-year-old man or woman would be able to offer, not some 19-year-old dropout from college. So if a college dropout is demanding $35 an hour to survive, they're not getting a job because they don't have the skills available, which means that they're unemployed, which then affects the unemployment benefits or the social welfare. The government has a system in place, I forget what it's called, to prevent unemployed people from dying, pretty much.
Social
Well,
Security?
just Social Security, yes, exactly. So when demand for that fills up, the Social Security budget and the funding will be cut, and people who are under Social Security may not have it anymore, or they may lose their funding, or they may not have it at all, which means that if they don't have a job and they don't have Social Security, they can't get food, they die. And unfortunately, in the worst possible scenario, the economy will go into equilibrium due to people simply dying off and demand gradually slowing. But regardless, the economy will go back to equilibrium and it will change, whether the bubble pops or the bubble gets smaller. But I think the course we're going right now, the bubble will pop. That is the negative situation that we're in right now.
Okay, I suppose. And you mean this in an economic sense, right?
Mostly, but also in the context of politics and even psychology as well. As tensions rise, people fight for jobs, they fight for survival. Um, Politics gets crazier. People become more divided. They get stuck in their beliefs. They go back into their little shell. I think humans have this thing called the ego, and I don't mean the ego as in this narcissistic person who wants everything. No, they have the ego as in the philosophical sense. The ego is what keeps them alive. It's what tells them, I need water, I need food, I need shelter. And when that is threatened, that voice that says, I need blank, just gets louder and louder and louder until you're literally saying it to people on the street and begging for survival. I need this. Please help me. Please feed me. And in that moment, people become more primal, and it's natural to become that way. That's the human instinct. The way I like to think about it is humans have different levels of behavior and cognitive processing. At the very, very top of the level is like transcendence and metacognition, thinking about other people, like almost envisioning different thought processes. But at the very lowest rung of that is just basic fight, flight, survival, fawn, freeze, whatever you want to call it, just instinct when all reason is devoid. And when the issue becomes so easy to spot, the idea of critical thinking almost becomes unnecessary because the human body is wired to seek survival. So at some point, people are going to ignore the politicians and the economists are saying, oh, well, this the data says what? And they say the people are going to say, well, I don't care about the data. I just want to live and survive. So the primitive behaviors kick in. People become violent. A revolution occurs, like with France. People just need survival. So, and I think that just socially as well, these ideas have like in 2015, I don't remember phrases such as woke or far right or nationalistic, etc. Those phrases being thrown around here and there. I mean, I'm sure they did exist, such as in Germany in the 1940s. They did exist before 2015 with Germany in the 1940s with the NPD or the National Sozialistic something. It was basically code word for Nazis. But anyways, um, I wasn't aware of that in 2015. But now these phrases of wokeness and sigma alpha male, they're showing this divide in society, and it's really disappointing. But it is inevitable. People become tribal, they hide. It's you kind of go back in time. You go from equality and oh happiness, environmental sustainability to give me food or you die. That sort of mentality is what it may be. A purge, basically.
Um, well, I would say one of the big reasons you probably didn't hear those phrases is because you probably weren't even 10 years old, and I wasn't even 10 years old either. But
Yeah.
that might be part of it. But I mean, it feels kind of like a bit of a pessimistic perspective because you're hinting towards a tribalism, a primalism that does
Right.
seem to increasingly exist within modern society, but it seems like sort of a synthetic invention of social media rather than the actual reality of living in the modern world. Because we have so many amenities, we have a lot of privilege compared to earlier generations. So it feels like more of an artificial thing.
Right. That is definitely very true. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is that a lot of the issues that we have are just tend to be very saturated. Like you think about the issues of the past, like, oh, I need water, I need food, and now we're over here worrying about like I need to pay my taxes. What's this woke stuff got to do with blah 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 blah? Like why is Trump doing blah? What NATO like this stuff it seems superficial, and I think that there may be a lot of reasons behind it. But when this bubble pops, we will go back to that state where we actually focus on necessities. And I think it is necessary to just think about that and to go back there just for a few years to get people to realize just how privileged we are and how the fact that we're worrying about, say, um, not getting enough likes on Instagram is just such a first world problem that it's almost unbelievable how selfish we can be. But on the other end of the spectrum, food is still a primal necessity. So there's nuance to it. On the one side, you have people complaining over superficial problems, but on the other side, you have people complaining about realistic issues that do need to be solved. And it's this intertwining of the two of them that causes this odd like struggle in society, I'd say.
So you mean to imply that eventually, so thinking about this in like sort of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're at
Yeah,
the sort of top rung where we're caring about the most well, I don't even want to say superficial things, but generally when you have all of your needs met, the next priority is social change. Um,
right.
but you're saying that it's gonna get more primal, more like food, water, shelter. Those are gonna be the necessities rather than um, into something superficial like social media likes, as you described.
Right. And I think just a quick pause for a topic is I think humans are naturally incredibly strong problem solvers. Like it is unimaginable how smart we are at problem solving. And I think that actually causes that can backfire to where we create problems for ourselves. And humans are able to do so many tasks that other animals can't do it at all. And I've actually been talking on ChatGPT for what this skill is. Let me review what it is. No other organism on the planet can do this. What is it called? It is very, very specific, but it's one second
Specific to humans?
specific to humans and is what has allowed us to. progress 2.5 million years or 200,000 years or 6,000 years or whatever you want to say for that given period of time. Um, it has allowed us to make tools. It has allowed us to formulate governments. It's a specific region within the brain that allows a very specific skill, and I need to figure out what it is called.
The neocortex.
It does have something to do with the neocortex, yes, but what is called? The strongest, so recursive abstraction through symbolic language. That's what it's called, recursive abstraction. So, symbolic language, the description is not mere communication, but the ability to represent abstract concepts, past and future events, and hypothetical ideas with arbitrary symbols. This makes a lot of sense when you think about animals. They're simply looking at food and water and shelter, whereas we can create abstract ideas such as philosophy itself, what we're discussing, mathematics, science, and recursive thinking. This is the thing where you say like I think that you think that they think that she thinks blah 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 blah. That skill is just so incredibly powerful, and I think we take it for granted. Um, yeah, unlike chimps, humans coordinate around joint goals with others. This allows for cooperation, cooperative teaching, division of labor, cumulative culture. So it's recursive abstraction. That is the skill that humans possess. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is that with that recursive abstraction and these incredibly powerful skills, we far surpass all other organisms. And but we that also means that we far surpass issues to where we create issues for ourselves. It I guess what I'm trying to say is not just from a societal level and not just within the next 10 years when society crashes, but I mean within the next like 2000, which isn't even that long considering we've been around for 2.5 million. But I think in just a few thousand years, society will crash for some reason, whether that be an asteroid impact or the environment. And I think that like we've developed a peak. From what I know of my limited knowledge of the dinosaur extinction, um, the dinosaurs, well, the religious saying goes that I think God wanted to kill the dinosaurs because they were simply too dangerous for the planet, and so he sent an asteroid and killed them. I'm not entirely sure if that's true or not, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that right before an animal goes extinct or an entire species mass extinction, there's this rapid development of some sort of thing, whether it be an adaptation, a technological advancement, or just an environmental change. And it's almost as if the organism becomes too good for Earth to where it needs a factory reset button, and it's like, oh, now you're just too good for Earth. Now I just have to kill you all. And I think that's going to happen to humans in a short period of time. We just don't know when. I'm
Okay.
afraid we've reached the peak of civilization.
The
Sorry, that's
West
a tangent, but
the West has fallen, as the 4chan meme
mm-hmm.
says.
Yep, the West has fallen. It will
uh,
start with the West, and it will cross over into Japan and the other developed nations, and then it will hit the Middle East and finally Africa, where it all started.
well,
And new organisms come up that are 30 times smarter than us.
well, you don't think that our problem-solving skills and our ability to think abstractly, unlike the say the dinosaurs or the other dominant species that have rapidly developed on Earth, you don't think that that ability will allow us to solve the problems before they get to the point where the civilization collapses entirely?
Well, I would say so. I don't think the extinction will entirely wipe out every single trace of humanity. I think that there will still be certain traits that we have. For example, shortly after the dinosaur extinction, there were still organisms on the planet, and they evolved into birds. And birds became the dominant species for a few thousand, maybe like 10,000 years or so. And then it went back onto the land. And I think a similar thing may happen with humans, where instead of inhabiting this specific environment, the lush forest, the oasis, we may, after the extinction, organisms that are very similar to us may instead inhabit the opposite climates that we don't like, such as deserts, tundras, and they may develop there. And the cycle will continue when they go extinct. It will be similar back to us. Just like with the dinosaurs dominating the seas and the ground and going to birds dominating the skies, a similar pattern will happen with humans.
Hmm. I mean, I don't know. It's just To me, it feels like I don't think that this will be necessarily the peak of Western civilization, or of civilization generally. I think I think it's really hard to determine. Of course, like you think about it sort of economically. Have you heard of the business cycle? You said you take economics, right?
Yes, we learn about the business cycle.
Right. The business cycle, it eventually always goes up, right? There will be
Right,
a recession for a period of about 2 years, and then it will go up.
right. Boom.
It's really hard. It's really hard to determine that this won't be the case. And of course, there are interesting factors that have never um, before existed that may influence the progression of humanity, a la social media, technology, technological augmentation. But I think these things, if anything, they serve to at least ostensibly um, provide prosperity for humanity, in the sense
Why
that
do you think so?
in the sense that they fulfill human desires. I mean, I think there's a case to be made. For example, you say, or for the end of civilization, you say maybe like nuclear warfare. That could be a possibility. But I don't know if that will be the case at least in our lifetimes.
Nuclear warfare? That you're saying that that won't happen at all?
Well, I'm not. I mean, it probably will happen at some point, or it may happen at some point. But what makes you think that it's going to happen within our lifetime? Like, why do you think this crisis is like immediate, like right now?
Well, I would say that in many areas of society, humans have naturally just grown exponentially. We've grown exponentially in population, exponentially in economically, exponentially in, I'm sure, many other areas such as energy consumption. And it seems we're about to go out of that near vertical stretch, that near vertical increase, such as China's one-child policy, which tried to slow population growth. And I think that's just a sign that we need to go backwards a little bit, or not that we need to, but that the world is forcing us, nature is forcing us to go backwards. And it's kind of interesting. It's as if I'm coming up with concepts on the spot here, but it's as if society, nature is making our brains go backwards, which may allow humans to go extinct as our whole body goes backwards. I don't know, but I'm just saying that after growth reaches its maximum, it will slow and then it will go and then it will stop and then growth will go backwards essentially. But we're pretty close to a peak.
So you say that because we were
However,
sorry.
however, with the business cycle, I'm looking at the graph right now. In general, as GDP goes up and time goes on, even with the recession, the trial, the recovery, expansion, and peak cycle, there is a long-term trend that has consistently gone up since, well, forever now, since the beginning of civilization, even factoring in the Great Depression or the economic crises of the ancient Roman Empire, we've generally gone upwards. The problem is, if this long-term growth trend ever even stagnates or goes down, that's bad. That's really, really hard to get out of that. That means that, so that says the growth rate of an economy refers to the percentage change in GDP. When an economy is approaching a peak in its business cycle, the rate of growth has begun to fall. When a recession begins, the actual output decreases. This means that the growth rate has become negative. Now, if the growth rate is like negative, that just means that it's growing at a lower level in general. It doesn't mean that it's not growing. The problem is if the growth rate isn't just negative, but that growth isn't happening at all, which I don't think has happened in society yet. Um, that's really that's bad. That means that the average in general of all economic product is going down. GDP is decreasing, not just going up at a slower rate, it's just straight up decreasing. Products, goods, and services are not being traded as well. Society, population may be going down, and I'm afraid that may happen at some point.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it all feels a bit abstract from the whole like economic comparison and everything. What? Why does this prolonged lapse in growth, I should say, or decline in growth, regression? Why is it tantamount to the end of civilization?
Well, we have to think about humans operate on the cycle of consumption and production. We produce food from farming, we used to, and we consume food to allow energy. Well, it gives us very immediately. It produces a cyclical cycle. You consume food to get energy to continue farming more food, and you consume that food to provide energy to continue. And that can be shown in many different areas of civilization. You get educated in school to, if you want to be a teacher, teach other people on how to be educated. They're very cyclical. And in general, the the rate of just general growth or decrease in growth or no growth at all is just such a valuable aspect. It's not just, oh, we're having a recession right now. It's no, we've been having a recession for 30, 40, 70 years. That's that's the problem, I think.
Well,
Sorry, did I get off topic? What was your question?
no. Well, I was wondering like why does it mean that civilization itself is coming to an end if we regress in growth for a prolonged period of time? And you say 70 years, but I think the economy's grown in
Or
70
not.
years.
Right. I wouldn't say 7 years. It may be longer, maybe shorter than that. But let's just think of it like this. It's really hard to stop a car immediately if it's traveling at 70 miles an hour. Due to the laws of physics, aerodynamic, and kinetic energy, you can't just stop a car going at 70 miles an hour. And I'm using that analogy to describe how you can't just put all the brakes on a recession. It has to slow down. You can't just stop it instantly. It's not possible. You have to like tell this person to stop doing something, tell this person to do something, and humans aren't really good at doing that because everyone wants to have power. So the average curve is just so valuable for understanding just what the predictions look like because it's not just what it is now. We can look at all the data we want to from the past, but it's what it is like in the future. And this curve, it's just so directly correlated with the way society is functioning. However, there are limitations. Just like with GDP, there are limitations to GDP, there are limitations to GNP, social welfare. These measurements can be flawed, they're not perfect, but they are still worth noting.
Yeah, I mean, and while we're on the macro scale, I mean, the only reason I point this out is because there's been these sort of prolonged, several decade long periods of stagnation within human civilization. Um, and then not necessarily human civilization, but within individual civilizations. The best one that comes to mind, for example, is Western civilization during the bubonic plague, right?
Right.
I'm sure there were many people during that time who thought that the world was ending because they had stagnated for so long. But eventually, of course, there was the Renaissance and then the Enlightenment and then the Industrial Revolution that brought about very, very tremendous growth. So I just don't know if since we're only looking at the broader trends, what is particularly special about this downturn?
Well, I guess on the topic of diseases, I was just curious like what are the causes that got us out of the bubonic plague? And interestingly, it says modern sanitation and public health practices have greatly mitigated the impact of the disease, but have not eliminated it. That not eliminated it is very important. And it seems as though you can start an issue, but it's really hard to stop it from ever happening again. It seems like once you start an issue, it will almost always be there. You can only make it smaller.
Um,
So once you start a recession, it seems like it's really hard. Like you can never get out of it unless there is a huge, huge issue that wipes out the entire economy in general. For example, if I guess in the context of the gold standard, you can't just continue producing more and more and more gold and say, "Oh, we have gold, we're out of recession." No, you have to get rid of gold entirely, and that's what happened. Is we got rid of the gold standard in I think 1930 something. I think Roosevelt was in president in House. I can't
yeah.
remember, but you can't just slow something. Like it's kind of like a virus. You can't just slow the spread of the virus and say, "Oh, we're fine. The virus won't bother us." And you have to kill the virus and get rid of it. Can't get rid of it, then well, you're screwed. Accept your fate, you know. I know that's pretty black and white, but that's what history seems to have been telling us.
I mean, I would kind of argue the opposite though. I mean, And of course, I mean, you could take into account sort of super bacteria or whatever, but since we're on the topic of pathogens, I would say that the bubonic plague is pretty much itself a negligible problem. And in comparison
Right.
to sort of pre modern times, the proliferation of disease itself has become much less of an issue in modern society. So I would say that the I mean it hasn't been completely eliminated to your point, but it's been almost entirely eliminated. It's negligible.
Right. Negligible.
And I just don't see why the problems that modern society has today couldn't have the same outcome.
Right. I guess my concern isn't necessarily how we can't mitigate the problem, and it's not how we can't get rid of the problem at all. It's that we've started problems in general. We've started unsolvable problems. And what concerns me is what caused these unsolvable problems. How you go from nothing to something, but then that something continues forever, or seemingly forever, and you can only make that something smaller. That's just what concerns me, is knowing that something goes on forever and it doesn't stop. But you, and not you specifically, but like society, you made the problem and you had the decision not to. I don't know. That kind of frightens me a little bit.
I mean, why should it frighten you if it's negligible?
Because it highlights a significant flaw in just humanity and the way we process things. Regardless of whether the problem is negligible or not, the problem is still there. And before the problem existed, there was no problem. I think society would be better off if we didn't have a problem at all than have a small problem. And I don't know. It's just odd. It's concerning that like we brought evil, I guess in a religious sense, we brought evil into in the Christian sense. I would say that we brought sin into this world. That sin can never be fully eradicated. It will always be there. But it hasn't been here forever. It has only been there um since Adam ate the apple. The period before Adam ate the apple, there was no sin at all. The issue is completely gone. But once Adam ate the apple to now, sin has existed and we can never get rid of it again. The concept of never getting rid of it again is just ultimately the definition of how everything in life is finite. Survival, ethics, morality. It's a little it's quite concerning.
I
You know
mean,
that song by Fleetwood Mac, "Nothing Lasts Forever" or something. On the cold November rains.
oh, I don't think I can. I don't think I can sing that song. I don't want to get copyrighted. Oh, that's a good song though.
That's true.
I would say I would say it's kind of hard to really reflect the nuance of modern problems with these sort of larger trends. Of course, you have the example of sin, right? In the Christian
Right.
theology. I mean, obviously, sin has been a problem since the dawn of human civilization, and it was created by man. Of course, assuming belief in the Christian theology. So I would say that I would say in particular though, it's just more difficult in the modern day because we've never seen anything quite like it. Compared to the bubonic plague, human civilization has grown, say, like 1,000-fold. I'm just saying that it could be useful to point out that though the people in the bubonic during who were living during the bubonic plague also thought it was the end of civilization. They thought it was the end of the world, right?
Right.
But they eventually found solutions through, say, science and the sanitation techniques and whatnot. And of course, immunization, just natural immunization. So I just don't see why that shouldn't be the case today. If we're thinking about it in the broad scope, and of course, like I said, there's a lot more nuance to modern society when it comes to these large-scale issues that you're referring to. So I think that's what we should probably be focusing on, though. But it was really just to point out that this is not a this sort of eschatological narrative that you're describing isn't necessarily new to modern society and modern civilization's problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see what you mean. You may be right. I think my perception may be a little too pessimistic. I'm researching the history of it right now, and I'm curious as to what exactly made it completely gone. Is it completely gone? That's my question.
The bubonic plague, no, it's not completely gone, but it's negligible. It's like 10 cases per year in the U.S. Or I mean, well, I say in the
That's so
U.S.
cool.
There's a little bit more around the world, but still not nearly as much as there once was.
Oh, interesting. So it says the Yersinia pestis has been discovered in archaeological finds from the late Bronze Age, 3800 BC. The plague is bacteria is identified by ancient DNA in human teeth from Asia and Europe, dating from 2800 to 5000 years ago. Some authors have suggested that the plague was first responsible for the Neolithic decline. So apparently, this plague must have happened, or this virus, whatever it is, may have
Um,
struck multiple times. First time in the Neolithic decline, 3450 to 3000 BCE, and again in when was this? 1300s
yeah.
in Europe. Interesting. So yeah, it doesn't go away. It only seems to come back in phases. It's been a long time since that last phase. It's about 600 years,
That is interesting.
700 years.
I didn't know
Third
it.
pandemic.
Hmm?
There's a third pandemic for the third time in the mid 19th century in Eastern Asia. This is interesting. It continued. So it doesn't seem like yeah, it doesn't seem like it's affected us since the 1900s. But that isn't to say that that it's not going to strike again. That's very interesting.
Well,
Anyways,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, well, from the Neolithic era to pre-Renaissance Europe to East Asia in the mid 19th century. I mean, it comes in these cycles, and it kind of refers to the sort of business cycle, figuratively speaking, that we were discussing earlier, right?
Hmm.
I'm inclined to believe that it's just a cycle that we're facing right now. Although, like I said, it's hard to say because the sort of modern technology that we're facing currently in the industrialized world is truly is truly cataclysmically nothing that we've ever seen before, and nothing that
Right.
we really understand. And there's never been something that has so effectively sort of captured human consciousness as much as artificial intelligence and social media and these sort of modern technological products. So,
Right. Technology does present an issue that is nothing like we've seen before. I mean, even with the plague, well, it was a shock, is still biologically wired to us. And the Great Fire that partly caused the fall of ancient Rome was biologically related with the first invention that humans have discovered. First major discovery was fire. But yeah, with technology, that's just something that nature has never seen before, and how we handle it is I don't even know. I was gonna say it's entirely dependent on blank, but I don't even know what it's dependent on. It's just such a unique issue.
yeah, and I feel like what's really unique about it is that when it came to the bubonic plague and these other diseases and these other crises of human civilization, we always were inclined to prevent it and stop it. But when it comes to this sort of technological degradation of modern society and the sort of hyper augmentation of society, addiction through smartphones, and it's very much intrinsic. The power is being it's sort of a soft power that's being exerted onto man. So, and it's not as if even everybody wants to change the status quo. It's not like this crisis is necessarily there's necessarily a conscious effort to revert this crisis, and that's what's particularly daunting and cataclysmic about this one in particular, in my opinion.
That is true. Well, you said in that last sentence that there's no real incentive to stop the crisis. Is that correct?
Uh, in a very primal sort of biological way, in the way that AI and social media sort of captivate the sort of deeper multiplexes of the human mind. So, yeah, essentially.
It's interesting. I would partly agree. I wouldn't say that there isn't any incentive at all to stop the issue. I would say that the incentive is mostly directed towards people who want to help the world. The problem is the people, other people are making the issue worse by finding financial incentives, such as mainly the large corporations that occur in this economy with Apple Intelligence or OpenAI. I mean, if you look at the chart, this is very interesting. If you look at the growth rate in users from um, what was it? The different technological advancements, such as Apple, and then compare it to the growth rate in like sorry, the most the amount of time it took an app to reach 1 million users. That's what the growth rate was. It was comparing open the ChatGPT app to I think it was like Microsoft, the very origins of technology. The growth rate of OpenAI was 10 times faster. It was on a near vertical line in such a short amount of time, relative to the other apps that have also had a huge technological impact.
Right, right. And I mean that just kind of emphasizes the scope of the crisis. And I think in the most fundamental sense, and here's the soundbite for the episode. Um, it's it's that these crises like the bubonic plague, they were man against nature. Our modern crises are man against man, fundamentally speaking. Am I wrong?
Right. I would say majority of the time, yes. However, I would say maybe transitioning into man against technology. However, that was started by man against man.
Right, right. That's what I mean.
Time to reach yeah. So this graph right here, time to reach 100 million users. The amount of months to get 100 million global monthly active users. Google Translate took 78 months. Uber took 70 months. Telegram took 61 months. Spotify took 55 months. Pinterest took 41 months. Instagram, which was released in probably 2008, took 30 months. TikTok, released in 2017, 18, 19, that took 9 months. And ChatGPT, released just 3 years ago, took 2 months. That's the graph I was looking at.
So that graph is to
But
emphasize that people are more and more intertwined with technology because the time it's taking to get these sort of notorious apps to 100 million users is getting shorter, right?
right. And another thing I might add is that the rate at which people recognize in the past, with the development of the computer and the development of the telephone and the television, there was enough time for people to be able to weigh the proper pros and cons of the invention of this device, or let's say the automobile, for example. I guarantee you that Henry Ford, before mass producing the vehicle, took years and years, not just developing his concept, but also weighing the ethical pros and cons of his situation. I think with Sam Altman, the creator of OpenAI,
Mm-hmm.
as much as he may be a genius, I'm concerned that with such a short amount of time from the time of OpenAI being introduced or even created, which I think was about 2017, to now, just that, not just the growth rate, but from the time that Sam Altman was just a person to a now multimillionaire, that's not enough time. I would argue that that's not enough time for him to weigh the ethical, like the ethical pros and cons of his decision. And I think it will only be about two or three or four more absolute geniuses especially within the tech field before society may collapse or maybe go backwards or slow. I mean, just you think about the time frame between these geniuses. You had let's say um Thomas Edison, for example. He was around 1847 to 1931. After that, it was Henry Ford. Henry
Right.
Ford was born a little bit later, maybe like 60 years later. And then afterwards, another person was born probably like 40 years later. And you keep going shorter and shorter and shorter. these geniuses keep popping up more and more frequently, and I don't think society can really handle that. While there were instances where multiple geniuses were alive at a single time, which I would argue would be like the scientific revolution with both Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler, all three men, among many others, were able to just really I don't want to get too much into religion here, but really just put a spotlight on science and critical thinking. That was one of the very few instances. I would say that's only the second time, one of two times where multiple geniuses were at once, and society completely changed as a result of that. I would argue that what we're in right now with Sam Altman, um, the CEO of Apple, CEO of Google, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting their names right now, but with these multiple geniuses at once, society can't really process it. And you can see this integration with geniuses taking ideas from other geniuses. And what I mean by that is with Sam Altman is invention of OpenAI. Now Apple is hopping onto the AI hype train, and now Google is hopping onto the AI hype train. Now, while Sam Altman didn't create AI, AI has been around for I think 40 years, 30 years. He created I think it's called either generative AI or LLMs or a lot of other similar concepts that completely revolutionized the field of AI. And what I'm trying to get at here is the growth rate in technology and the hopping on the hype train phenomenon is just getting so much faster and more frequent. And it's exponential. I'd almost say it's exponential.
Yeah, I mean,
And yeah, uh, concerning. Sorry.
no, no, you're good. I mean, you're right. I mean, and that has a lot to do with political and economic incentives that come with sort of democratic capitalism. And that's not a critique of capitalism necessarily, because progress was to happen anyway, likely, because the as we've described, the sort of human the sort of human curve of progress is always up, and it always has been since the dawn of human civilization, right? Generally speaking.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I think it's worth pointing out that those systems, as well as, of course, the simple fact that the human population has risen exponentially as well. Well, I mean, it's curving off a little bit now. Um, has risen. I think it's. I think that's probably the reason why that these geniuses, as you describe them, and I think they sort of symbolize and epitomize the technological progress itself. I don't know if it's necessarily wise to say that to just say to look at the sort of volume of geniuses and derive the conclusion, well, therefore that they are the reason why technological progress is getting better. That kind of reflects more of the sort of great man view of history, in this case of technology. Um, but I mean, it is worth noting, I would say. But that's just to give you an explanation, maybe for why.
Right. And I guess to add to your point, I would agree that my argument was a little bit flawed. Now I'm starting to think that it's not just the sole existence of these people, because Sam Altman wasn't just born as a woman, his mother's womb, and say, I'm gonna start making AI technology amazing right now. That's not how ideas come to be. At least in the term of from an empirical point of view, you weren't really born with the tendency to just start creating incredible things. You have to have influence from it.
Right.
And in the case of, for example, Galileo or Kepler, their influence was their own imagination. But it wasn't entirely their imagination. It wasn't entirely too intuitive. I think it was mostly the pressures of the church and their willingness, their desire to understand more. The church was, I think, in the context of idea creation, there there could be an agonist and an antagonist. Either of them have something to do with the creation of a new idea. For example, with Kepler or etc., they had the antagonist, which was the church. And I think, ironically enough, that influenced them to develop even more concepts and even more theories, the heliocentric theory, the geocentric theory, and these other ideas. It fostered it. And on the other end of the spectrum, when you have the agonist, the one that increases it, instead of it being the church in the modern world, you have Sam Altman, who is uses has society as an agonist. He sees these technological advancements and wants to hop on the hype train and continue progressing. And I think that those two, there are lots of conclusions that can be drawn from the scientific revolution and what we are in now. And even though they may be 500 years apart, it's just fascinating to see the impact. And I just want to take a moment to look at the impact of the scientific, just very briefly, on what the scientific revolution has done to us as a society. And I think that's kind of where the start, actually, no, I'd say the start of all this could have begun in ancient Greece with Pythagoras and the idea of mathematics. But just an emphasis on the scientific revolution, the idea of space and time and our existence, that struck existential fear into us, just as it is striking existential fear into us now in terms of technology. And of course, science and technology are very, very, very related. I mean, the first two letters in STEM are science and technology. So I'm trying to draw some parallels between these two, and I went on tangent there again, but
You're good, man. We're trying to be off the cuff here. I mean, and I guess to just sort of bring it all back, I want to sort of ask you, where do you see science and technology in the next 10, 15 years? Where do you think it's going to be? And do you think that it's going to have a cataclysmic effect on um, social and psychological conditions in the developed world?
so I would argue that it will go in two ways. Could go in two ways. Number one is that um, technology will continue to increase, economic profit will continue to increase, and then when that inevitable recession hits, just assuming it is inevitable in this case, technology will, number one, in the first option, it will decline. Productivity will decline, firing will happen, and it may even out the field. I don't think it will. I don't think the AI hype will be gone forever, but it will definitely slow it down. On the other end of the spectrum, um, if the technology were to continue going up and up and up, and that recession hits, I think with the idea of people being unemployed and staying at home, well, it is terrible for the environment or for society. That may encourage other forms of technology being used to allow for employment, which may then spiral into other areas of society, such as education in general, areas that improve social welfare, such as health and medicine. That may it may snowball, or I guess I wouldn't say snowball. It would be the scenario where you have two, it's very abstract, but if you have two spheres and you're jumping between them, every time you jump from one sphere to the other and back to the other one, you keep speeding up how quickly you're traveling. And the distance between them gets faster and faster. And I think after the recession and this other concept, the technology will keep bouncing back and forth. It would be technological development, economic prosperity. Economic prosperity then leads to technological development, and so on and so forth. It is cyclical.
Right.
After that point, that may, as science fiction as it may be, it may lead to technology overcoming us in some way or another, which may A, slow down the technological progression again, assuming it didn't already happen, or assuming it did happen, or wipe out the human race. But it will be very interesting to see what happens within the next 10 years because it is growing incredibly fast. 2022 was 3 years ago.
Oh my
Phone's been
gosh.
around for 16. The iPhone has been around for 16, 17, 2007, 18 years. And in general, it has grown at a rate, like AI has grown at a rate or like 3,000% faster than the iPhone. Maybe not 3,000, but significantly faster. Yeah.
My gosh, yeah,
This,
it's always strange to think about how say 2020 was 5 years ago and how 2018 was 7 or 2017 was 8, right?
right.
How time
Well,
flies
more
by.
stuff is happening.
Right,
There's more
right.
stuff happening in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily agree with the point that technology won't increase in say development during this recession because it doesn't usually tend to. Um, generally, the reason that economic cycles trend upward, actually, I would argue, is because technology is like linearly increases. it doesn't ever tend to fall, generally speaking.
Really?
I mean, there'll
I
be
mean, I could kind of see what you mean. Like, if we develop technology at a certain rate and then like a tsunami just wipes us out, that will force us to go back to our roots and rebuild our homes. But I'm not sure how that will impact technological advancement. On the one hand, it may slow education, which may slow technology, but on the other hand, it may force humanity to develop tsunami resistant homes. And I guess in that sense, it may speed up technology, but trying to determine which will be more likely.
right. I mean, I'm not saying that the technological progress can't slow down. It certainly can. And I
Right.
think the benefit of well, I mean, I say benefit. The benefit for the economic prosperity of Western civilization is that we have sort of capitalist and democratic political and economic institutions that proliferate technological progress. I would say fundamentally speaking. But it's just to say that technology as it develops doesn't generally regress. Not not like
That's
um,
true.
not like economic systems do, at least.
That is true. Yeah, it would be very, very, very difficult for us to all of a sudden go backwards. Like we can increase technological progression, and it may fluctuate in the rates at which in the rates at which it is progressing. But I don't know if say it. I don't know how society would function if technology goes backwards. Like if we just suddenly within the course of 20 years go from metal vehicles powered by ICEs to steam engines. I don't know if that's exactly possible.
Yeah, and I mean the truly
Can't be possible.
yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it's just to say that I mean, and I want to kind of go a little deeper because we've been kind of focusing on the sort of macro trends and the like with business cycles and stuff like that. But it's more to say, how do you think that how do you think technology and growth itself, the growth that technology has created and the changes in political and social dynamics that it's created, do you think that that's an overall benefit for human civilization, or do you think that that's more of a disastrous? It's had more of a disastrous effect on human civilization.
It depends on which viewpoint you're looking at. If you're looking from an economic, technological, and overall social welfare perspective, it is absolutely hands down a benefit. 99% of the time, technological improvement is a benefit to society. It is an improvement to social welfare. However, if we're looking from a more primitivist perspective and a desire to live life in a more simple way that strictly focuses on the duration of the human existence, or maybe even not that, but just for general human fulfillment, in the sense that we should be more like animals and consume and get rid ourselves of this or it's not even a word, rid ourselves of these superficial contexts, then no, technological advancement is not generally considered a quote unquote good thing. But it depends on the viewpoint. In my perspective, I can't say for certain whether it is good or bad. All I know is that the economy will have to go into equilibrium or it will have to crash and humanity will go extinct. As black as it may seem, I cannot imagine any other alternative.
I
We are
mean,
reaching a peak.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's and you're kind of right to point out that it is a little too simple to say is technology good or bad. I mean, you're obviously correct to say that it's benefited social welfare and benefited the general welfare of human existence. Because you have to think, well, why do we pursue technology anyway? Well, it's to make well, as any organism at the deepest level, it's to help us survive and reproduce, right?
Exactly.
By increasing convenience, generally speaking. But it's just to say, it's just to say that we've kind of molded our civilization around technological progress and achievement to the point where it's kind of overshadowed the more natural elements of human existence because we are in this sort of rabid we're sort of rapidly seeking to proliferate these institutions and this technological progress at all costs, if that makes sense.
Yes, I can see what you mean.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just to say that we, instead of us controlling technology, technology is starting to control us. Like you were saying, man versus technology instead of man versus man. That's why it's kind of congruous
Right.
because we created the institutions to increase technological development, right?
Right.
I don't know.
The problem is,
It's
oh,
just to say
sorry.
it's backfired. Sorry.
Yeah, it has backfired. We've become less autonomous. Well, actually, it's kind of an ironic calling ourselves autonomous in the sense that we are manually controlling our own selves. But on the other hand, it's autonomous in the sense that technology is controlling us. So what does auto even mean anymore? um, I would say that we're becoming less manual with our lives, and I'd say that's been a trend since the 1870s. Actually, since the invention of the steamboat or the boat, travel has become more automated. But I mean, I could come up with hundreds of examples. In general, we've just become more automatic with our lives.
And
We don't hunt and kill a bird and then cook it ourselves. We order it from generally.
my bad, I sneezed.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So you're saying more automatic, less deliberate, and ultimately less meaningful is what I'm really getting at.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's what I mean when I was asking you, what do you think the effects that technology and technological progress, specifically you refer to AI and Sam Altman and the like, what effect do you think that's going to have on social and sort of cultural trends?
It will certainly create a divide. Similar to how with the current uprising in the economy will create a divide between the hyper left leaning and the hyper right leaning, there may be a similar divide between those who choose to pursue artificial intelligence and live a life that is not autonomous, in that they rely on technology entirely. And then it may also create a second group on the opposite end of the spectrum, these primitivist people, people who may even go as far as to literally live like cavemen, because they refuse the use of technology and are too scared to even step foot near it, which is completely reasonable, at least in that scenario. Regardless, just it will create a divide, just like how it's creating divide politically with whatever's happening politically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but it gets a lot trickier. So assume you're a primitivist, right? Does that mean
Right.
that if you forbid the use of any technology, does that include the wheel? Does that include stone tools? At what point do you draw the line? And how would that line not be arbitrary?
Mhm. Exactly right to point that out. Very epistemological perspective.
Right, and it's difficult because you have to think about it. The pursuing of technology, generally speaking, is part of human nature, right? But at the same time, it's caused the destruction of human nature, right?
Right.
So it's this double-edged sword, and I think that that's really the strongest point that you're making towards like sort of social decline and how we've peaked, as you described, because we're in this sort
Right.
of rock and a hard place where either way we go, we're sort of foregoing our human nature, and we're becoming less human in a sort of sense.
Right. In a sort of pessimistic sense.
Yeah, and
One thing to be pessimistic. How do we be optimistic without sorry. How do we be optimistic without being overly judgmental? I don't know.
yeah. Um, do you want to leave it at that? I think we've reached about an hour.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, it's been nice chatting with you, Carter.
That certainly has.
I'll be
Yeah.
sure to have you on again.
All right.
All right,
Thank you.
no problem. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Sit Down Sunday. And if you did, please leave a like and comment on Spotify or YouTube. And I am Aiden. This is the Future President Podcast. See you later.